Usually when you think of a massive explosion, your mind gravitates towards the nuclear bombs and the absolute ferocity of them. Though there are many city-destroying or at least town-destroying non-nuclear explosions that have gone off before. Take, for instance, the recent Beirut explosion. I know it didn't really destroy the city, but it did do a lot of damage, destroying a lot of the port and infrastructure of it. But we aren't focusing on Beirut. Today we're focusing on the largest non-nuclear explosion that man has caused, the Halifax Explosion of 1917. During the First World War, Canada of course joined in alongside Britain due to them being a British dominion. Through this, the Allies got a staging ground in North America that they could use to send troops, supplies, and goods in general. One important port for the Allies, and especially the Royal Navy, was Halifax. Halifax has always thrived during war, including the American Revolution, the War of 1812, and even the Napoleonic War. Eventually, the Canadians were able to take the Halifax dockyard for themselves, and they eventually turned it into the command center for the Royal Canadian Navy in 1910. Once the First World War broke out, the British adopted it as the North American base of operations. The port was actually so important that all neutral ships bound for North America had to report to Halifax for inspection. Funnily enough, the Canadians didn't really have a navy at the start of the war. They only had two cruisers, the HMCS Rainbow and the HMCS Niobe, with a combined strength of 350 crew. But eventually the Navy got some tugboats, minesweepers, and patrol ships for Halifax. Now let's move on to the actual disaster that occurred on December 6. There were two main ships involved in the explosion, the SS Mont Blanc and the SS Imo. Let's start with the main ship carrying the dangerous cargo, the Mont Blanc. The SS Mont Blanc was a freighter built in Middlesbrough, England in 1899 and eventually purchased by a French maritime company. On that fateful day, the Mont Blanc was carrying about 2,925 metric tons of explosives. This was divided between 62 tons of gun cotton, 246 tons of benzol, 250 tons of TNT, and 2,367 metric tons of picric acid. This was all for the French war effort. The ship was bound to join a small convoy heading to Europe in the Bedford Basin, which is the northwestern end of the Halifax harbor. Now let's discuss the SS Imo. She was a Norwegian ship that was sailing from the Netherlands to New York to pick up relief supplies for the Belgians. Remember that all neutral ships bound for North American ports must report to Halifax for inspection. The ship arrived in Halifax on the 3rd of December, and she was cleared to leave on the 5th, but she had to wait until morning of the 6th due to refueling delays. At around 7:30 a.m., the IMO was given clearance to leave the Bedford Basin and head out of Halifax. The IMO was going above the speed limit to make up for the lost time due to refueling delays. Eventually, the IMO saw an American steamer, the SS Clara, being piloted on the wrong side of the harbor. The pilots from both ships agreed to pass each other starboard to starboard, or right side to right side. This was against the rules of the harbor, though, as ships in the channel were supposed to keep to the shore on their right side and pass ships port to port, left side to left side. Anyway, this made the IMO go into the wrong lane of traffic in the channel. This was made even worse when the IMO had to head even closer into the wrong lane to avoid colliding with a small tugboat. The Mont Blanc entered the harbor early in the morning. Francis Macney, the pilot of the Mont Blanc, spotted the IMO when it was about 3/4 of a mile away. He gave a blast with the whistle showing he had the right of way, but the IMO responded with 2 blasts saying they won't turn away. After a further back and forth, collisions seemed to become more and more imminent. Soon the two ships were extremely close to each other. Right before a collision would occur, Macney turned hard to port. This somewhat worked and the ships were almost at a parallel, but the IMO was suddenly put in reverse. Through certain factors of the ship, the reverse caused the front of the IMO to collide with the Mont Blanc's starboard side. Now the collision caused pretty minor damages to the ship, only toppling over a few barrels, but the barrels contained benzol, which broke open onto the deck, flooding the ship with a highly flammable liquid. When the IMO tried to reverse out of the Mont Blanc's hold, it produced sparks which ignited the benzol in the hull of the Mont Blanc. Of course, this caused the Mont Blanc to go ablaze. After about 20 minutes of burning, the Mont Blanc exploded. The exact time was 9:04 a.m. The energy released was the equivalent to about 2.9 kilotons of TNT. For comparison, the Beirut explosion was equivalent to about 500 to 1,100 tons of TNT. Little Boy, the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima, was about 15 kilotons of TNT. The ship was completely blown apart. Parts of the ship, like the gun turret and the anchor, were found miles away from the blast site. The shock wave traveled about 23 times the speed of sound and was felt as far as Cape Breton, which was about 129 miles away. The harbor floor was actually exposed at one point due to the sheer power of the explosion. A tsunami that was about 18 meters or 60 feet tall was caused by the water rushing back in. Over 1,600 people died instantly in the explosion, and all buildings within a 2.6 kilometer or 1.6 mile radius were destroyed or badly damaged. This amounted to about 12,000 buildings. Though the death toll could have been a lot worse if it weren't for railroad dispatcher Patrick Coleman. Coleman stayed at his post after learning about the deadly cargo on the Mont Blanc, warning an incoming train that was heading to the harbor. His message to the train was, "Hold up the train, ammunition ship afire in the harbor, making for Pier 6 and will explode." Guess this will be my last message. Goodbye, boys. Patrick Coleman was killed at his post that fateful morning. His message caused passenger train number 10 to stop, saving about 300 lives. At first, the main rescue efforts were led by surviving policemen, firemen, and military personnel. All hospitals began filling up to the point where hospital ships were needed to help all that were injured. The fire department played a major role in the disaster. The first motorized fire engine in Canada, the Patricia, was one of the first to respond to the Mont Blanc fire. It was caught up in the explosion, killing 4 out of the 5 crew. Eventually, military ships near Halifax rushed towards the harbor to begin rescue efforts. Some thought the explosion was a bomb dropped by a German plane, so troops began to take position at gun batteries just in case it was. After about an hour, they were transferred to rescue roles. There were also a fear of a second explosion occurring. This was due to a fire breaking out near the ammunition magazine in the Welleton barracks. This led to officers ordering everyone to evacuate the area. The fire was soon put out, but it caused the rescue efforts to be delayed by about 2 hours. Many rescue trains were sent from all around Canada and the northeastern United States, most notably Boston, though a blizzard occurred the following day with about 16 inches or 41 centimeters of snow. This led to delays in the trains arriving to Halifax. There were a total of 1,782 confirmed deaths caused by the Halifax explosion and the following tsunami. About 9,000 people were left injured by the explosion. The explosion led to a lot of people becoming homeless, as 1,630 homes were destroyed and another 12,000 damaged. 6,000 people went homeless and another 25,000 had very poor shelter. Eventually, a judicial inquiry was created to investigate the cause of the explosion. They found that the Mont Blanc captain, Aimé Lemedec, the Mont Blanc pilot, Francis Macney, and Commander Evan Wyatt were to be blamed for the explosion. The inquiry said it was the Mont Blanc's responsibility to ensure that the collision would be avoided at all costs, though it is said that the prosecutors may have been influenced by the anti-French opinion in the area. They were charged with manslaughter and criminal negligence. Of course, these charges were eventually dropped. Eventually, it was said that both ships were to be equally blamed for causing the explosion, but no one was ever convicted for this. The community of Richmond and Halifax took most of the explosion and was most heavily affected. The community had very few paved roads, so the city thought it would be a good idea to add paved roads during the rebuilding process. The explosion actually somewhat helped the city modernize because it got rid of a lot of the older buildings. The dock was heavily damaged from the explosion, but it was eventually back up and running before Christmas. Well, might as well give you a little happy fact before the video ends. Each year since 1971, Halifax gives a Christmas tree to Boston in thanks for their help in the rescue efforts. The tree has become Boston's official Christmas tree and is lit each year in the Boston Common. Overall, the Halifax explosion is not really mentioned, as it was usually overshadowed by the absolute mass of the atomic bombs. But it is a good representation of what human error can cause. Sometimes we are too dumb for our own good. Well, anyway, thank you for watching the video, and have a good one.